Many years ago, I worked at McDonald's for a few months. This was way back when I had recently graduated from high school and was attending a local junior college. I was living with my parents and driving to and from school as well as work. We lived in kind of a small town. It was quiet and calm, and not too many crazy things happened. McDonald's was one of the few businesses that we did have in our town. When I worked there, mostly I would be behind the counter taking people's orders, and usually I would work a shift in the afternoon until late at night. The McDonald's was open for 24 hours back then that I worked at, but I would get off of work at 11 because I was in school, and we didn't need quite as many people working in the overnight hours. The McDonald's never really got that busy. We would get customers at the busy hours, but I don't recall it ever being super crazy. After I worked the job for a few months, I was in a routine of work. I would work a few nights a week, typically getting off at 11. At that time, it would usually be very quiet. When I got off of work, I started to notice this one car in the parking lot with the engine always running and the lights on. It was a 4-door sedan, maybe 15 years old or so, nothing really standing out about it. I couldn't tell who was driving, but never really looked that hard. I just remember leaving for work a few times and seeing it each time. It wasn't a coworker because I would have known who it was. At one time, I sat in my car and texted a few people before leaving, so I was there for a few minutes. The driver never got out or anything. At times, I would get out a little early at maybe 10:45 and the car would be there. Or if I stayed a little late till like 11:15, the car was also there. It was there every time that I got off of work for like 2 weeks in a row. It was something that I always forgot about though. I would only really remember or think about it when I got off of work and noticed it again. I was curious and it seemed sort of odd, but then I would just drive home and forget about it. I thought maybe it was somebody just on a break at their job that was maybe not far away. Who knows? But then, one time, the car was there like normal. When I left for work though, the car followed me. It drove the whole way back home to my parents' house, which was like 10 minutes, but a few streets before mine, it turned off. It freaked me out a little, but it didn't follow me all the way home. Then, like the next 3 or 4 times that I got off of work, the same exact thing happened. No matter when I left, the car would leave right after me, follow me for most of the way, and then turn at the same spot before my house. I told myself maybe this person just lives sort of by me, but why would they always leave right after me? It was creeping me out quite a bit. Then, one night, I got off like usual. It was around 11 p.m. I left the McDonald's and walked out to my car. This time, I saw the creepy car was parked right next to mine. Normally, it was parked at least 5 spaces away and in the same general spot. I wouldn't always park in the exact same place either, because when I would arrive at work, sometimes the McDonald's would be busy. But this was the same general area. This car was always at least a few spaces away from me and had never been next to me. But tonight, it was parked right there, and this freaked me out even more. Still, I tried to ignore it. I got into my car and didn't look at the other one. Then I started the engine. After that, I drove away. Right when I did, the car left too. It followed me all the way back. However, this time, it did not turn at its usual place. It followed me all the way to my parents' house. When I arrived back, I pulled onto the side of the road out front. I was afraid to pull into the driveway knowing that it would take longer. I just parked, got out, and sprinted for the house. I ran inside and made it. When I looked back, the car was pulling over too, but at least nobody was getting out. I instantly found my parents and told my dad about it. He went over to the front door and the car was now parked out front of our house. My dad walked right outside towards the car. However, before he got halfway to it, the car very quickly drove away. The next time that I worked was several nights later. When I got to work that night, I brought it up to a few coworkers. I asked them if they had any idea who drove that car. None of them had any clue as to what I was talking about though. That night when I was working behind the counter at probably about 10 p.m., things were very quiet. Nobody was in the restaurant until I saw the doors open and a man walked in. From what I remember, he looked to be in his 40s, was somewhat short but large, and had a slight beard and was balding. He walked up to me and I got ready to take his order. However, when I asked how I could help him, he just said, "Tell your dad that he's a coward." Then he turned around and calmly walked away. He left the McDonald's, and at first I was so confused that I didn't say anything. Then, after he had left, I realized that it had to be the guy from the car. I quickly went to the back and told a coworker. We went out into the parking lot and just barely saw the guy driving away. It was the same car. My manager heard about the whole thing and she let me leave early. I didn't see the car at all. After that, I was given 2 weeks off. When I returned to work, the car never showed up again. I also never saw it at my house either. That's something that still gives me the creeps every time I think back to it. A few years ago, I was on a road trip with my husband. We were driving across the country and doing a lot of sightseeing and visiting parks. So one time when we were in the middle of the road trip, we left a hotel to hit the road. The hotel that we were staying at did not have a breakfast, so we stopped at the McDonald's in town. When we got there, it was very busy. My husband waited in the car and I went to get the food. A lot of other people were standing around inside the McDonald's. I ordered and then waited amongst the other people. As I looked around, I noticed a man across the room. He was standing kind of far away, but he appeared to be looking in my direction, and he started making these weird and creepy faces. I wasn't sure at first if something was wrong with him. It appeared as though he was intensely staring at me, and going from a creepy grin to a mad face. Then he would go back to a straight face. I stopped looking at him because it was weird. When I looked back, he was still doing it. I just kept waiting. After some time, I noticed that the man was starting to walk very slowly closer and closer in my direction. It was like he was moving a foot or two closer, just standing there, and then moving a little bit closer a few seconds later. He soon became just about 20 feet away from me. At last, though, my order was called. I walked up to the counter and picked it up, and then started walking to the exits. I got out of there and was glad to be away from the guy. I went back to the car with my husband, and we continued with our road trip. I told him about the guy, and we laughed it off given the fact that he didn't really do anything. We drove pretty much all day. We did stop a few times to see some sights and to get food again as well as gas, but none of our detours and stops really took that long. We drove until nighttime when we were tired, and then we stopped to get another hotel. This one was a pretty cheap place. We didn't mind much though. In fact, it was a motel. However, we just parked, got the room, and then went inside. After going into our room, I remembered that I was looking out the window. It had a view of mostly just the parking lot. When I did, I saw the same guy from before. He was walking in the parking lot kind of towards the main offices of the motel. As I was looking out the window, at first the man was not looking in my direction, but he then turned his head towards me and saw me. When he noticed me, he went back to his famous creepy smile. I quickly looked away. I could not believe it. We were hundreds of miles away from the McDonald's where I saw him earlier that morning. How was he here, and why was he here? We looked out of the window, but now he was gone and out of sight. It was really crazy. After that, we just tried to forget about it. We watched TV until we got tired. But really late at night, there was a knock on the door. My husband went over and looked through the peephole. It was the same guy. He didn't stay there long though, walking away after about 30 seconds. After that, he didn't come back. We left early the next morning and didn't see the guy at all. We didn't see him for the rest of the trip. But it was so weird. Did that guy follow us all the way there? I mean, it was hundreds of miles. If not, that's one of the craziest coincidences ever. I live in an apartment building that's right across the street from a McDonald's. More than a few times since living here, I've wandered across the street late at night to get something. But one of those times led to a very scary encounter for me. It was a pretty typical night. I often work late and I'm also a night owl. So I was at my apartment and at about midnight I left and walked across the street to the McDonald's. There is the apartment complex and then the street which can get busy during the day and then the McDonald's right across it. However, at this time of night the street was dead quiet. I walked across it and then went inside McDonald's. There was nobody else inside when I got there. I ordered, eventually got the food pretty quick, and then started walking back. I was gone from my apartment for probably less than 10 minutes. When I arrived back to the door I usually enter through, I noticed a woman standing out front. I hadn't seen her before, but thought that maybe she lived in the building. Either that or she was maybe visiting someone. When I got closer, she looked at me and asked if I could let her inside. I didn't think much of it and said sure. I didn't even ask her why, but I didn't feel the need to. She didn't seem sketchy to me. So I went inside and she followed me in. Then I started walking through the hallways to my place, which was down a couple of hallways but still on the first floor. The lady started walking behind me the entire ways. When I got to my place, she was still there. Then she stopped at my door behind me as if she was going to go into my place. I asked her, "What are you doing?" She said that I said I would let her in. I said to the building, not my actual apartment. The woman said that she needed a place to stay and she thought that I said I would let her in. I said, I think there's been a misunderstanding. The woman interrupted me and said, are you going to let me in or not? I said not. I quickly went inside and then locked the door behind me. The woman was still standing there right on the other side of the door. Then she knocked on it. I yelled at her to go away. I looked out as she finally stormed off. I thought that she was gone for good, but she was not. About 5 minutes later, I heard more knocking at my door. I figured that the lady was back, but I went to the door to look. She was, but this time she had this big-looking guy with her. He looked angry, and he was now banging on my door as well. I yelled at them to leave. They did not. Instead, they both started banging on my door loudly and yelling at me. They were cursing and telling me to open the door. I was afraid that they might succeed in breaking the door down. Soon, I heard a couple of other people's doors open down the hallway. People were no doubt angry from all the noise. At first, this did not seem to stop the angry man and woman. I heard a few neighbors tell them to quiet down, though. They ignored it for a while. They banged on the door some more and yelled for maybe 5 minutes. Then they finally stopped and angrily left. I was obviously afraid that they would come back again, but they didn't. I still don't know why on earth that woman thought that I would let her into my apartment. And who was the guy? I figured that she must have let him in the apartment building given the fact that she was already inside. But it still blows my mind how crazy of a situation that was. I didn't go out late at night for a while after that. For a period of time a long time ago, I used to work at McDonald's as a manager. I worked there for about a year and dealt with some crazy things, but one time is by far the craziest thing to ever happen there. It was an average evening for the most part. We got somewhat busy and I was helping with different tasks. At our McDonald's, we never had enough employees and were seemingly always short, so I did a little bit of everything. At one point though, I was in the back for a while, but I heard that someone was asking for me. Apparently there was a dispute with the customer and he asked for the manager. So I walked up to the counter and saw one of my employees looking upset and an angry man on the other side of the counter. I didn't hear any of the conversation, but I knew the employee he was dealing with was very nice. The man asked me if I was the manager and I said yes. He then told me how he was mad because the fries were cold, but he went on to insult my employee and call her stupid. He did not seem interested in resolving the matter, only in letting out his anger towards us. After he started swearing towards us employees, I yelled at the guy and told him to get out. I said we weren't doing anything and if he didn't leave now I would ban him and call the cops. He continued to yell at us and literally everybody else in the restaurant was staring at the scene. Eventually though, the guy finally walked out and left. I was glad that I didn't have to call the police on him. Then we resumed back to normal for the most part. Eventually, within about an hour, we all moved on and were feeling better. As it got later, things quieted down. I remember that at one point, I went to take out the trash. We had dumpsters in an area behind the building. So I walked over to a back door and put a few trash bags in the dumpster. As I did, I saw past the few trees next to the dumpster into the very back corner of the parking lot. There was the man standing in the shadows. He saw me and instantly started to walk over. I didn't want to fight the guy, so I just turned around and walked back inside. Those doors automatically locked, but I just hoped that the man wouldn't come back through the main doors. After I got back inside, I stayed near the doors. Within moments, I heard some loud noises from outside. The guy was doing something, but I didn't know what, so I decided to go out and see. So I walked around to the main doors and left the restaurant. I walked over to see the man. He was outside by the dumpsters, and it appeared that he had taken the trash bags out of the dumpsters and messed them all around. He had dumped them out and there was garbage everywhere. I told the man that he had to stop and leave now or I was going to call the police. Once more he started yelling and cursing at me. This guy had to be insane. He had waited for over an hour as the last altercation was a long time ago, and he apparently was just standing in the parking lot. I kept telling him that he had to go now, but he just wouldn't. So eventually I went back inside and I called the police. I was on a mission to get him banned from our McDonald's forever. I waited inside for the police and the man did not enter the McDonald's for a while. Then, within about 5 minutes, when I thought the cops would be there any moment, the man walked back inside. This time he walked right over to me. I told him that I already called the cops. He claimed that he didn't care, and he just stood there looking at me. I didn't know what he wanted now. I just hoped that he didn't want to fight me or something like that. I stood there and he stared at me. It was like we were having a standoff. Then, finally, the cops got there. When they did, the man tried to run for the other exit. The police told him to come back, but when he didn't listen to orders, they ran after him. The man ran out into the parking lot and apparently went around the building. Eventually, he was caught by the cops. The man ended up having several illegal drugs on him and was arrested. He was also banned from our McDonald's forever, and I haven't seen him since. This happened a few years ago now, but I won't forget it. I was with my girlfriend and we were driving back. It was pretty late, but I had some caffeine, so I was good to drive. However, not long into the drive, we were both very hungry, and we were driving kind of out in the middle of nowhere. We saw this McDonald's sign sort of behind some trees and a ways off the road, so we took the next exit. Then we followed some really quiet and dark roads until we reached the McDonald's. Now, it's worth mentioning that the light that we saw for McDonald's was not lit up. It was just a tall M sign, but those are not always lit up, and sometimes the place is still open. But when we got to the McDonald's, we couldn't really tell if it was open or not. It looked like there was some light on inside, but there were absolutely no cars in the parking lot at all. At least not on the side of the building where we went. There could have been some around back. It just seemed really quiet and almost deserted. Nearby was really nothing else other than a gas station a ways down the road, I think. But we were very hungry, so we decided to park and see if it was open anyways. So we parked the car, got out, and walked up to the doors. Surprisingly to me, the doors were unlocked, and we went inside. However, once we were in, we walked up to the counter and nobody was there. Not only that, but there was really nothing behind the counter at all. It became clear that the restaurant was not open, and it appeared to be abandoned. There were still all the tables and chairs inside the restaurant, but they were very old and outdated. The whole place looked like it was straight out of the 90s. Behind the counter, though, was where you could really tell that things were missing. The strangest part was that there was a light on near the counter. In our time inside, my girlfriend and I were talking with each other about how weird it was. We soon thought that maybe they were going to do construction or something like that, and that's possibly why the place was left unlocked and a light was on. But we didn't hear any noises at all when we were inside, until we were sort of at the back corner of the dining room area. We had been inside for maybe 2 or 3 minutes and were just looking around because we found it interesting how the place looked deserted and was so outdated. As we were just admiring about how it looked untouched for years, we suddenly heard somebody say loud and clear from near the counter, "Can I take your order?" We both looked in that direction at once, but we could not see right to that spot because of where we were. I felt nervous and we both walked over there. However, when we got within sight of the counter, we saw no one. We walked all the way up to it and nobody was there at all. We asked who was there, but got no answer. However, we did hear somebody walking back in the kitchen area out of sight. I didn't want to stay any longer. We both just walked out and left. We drove to a gas station some ways down the highway instead. Then we went back home. After that, I tried to look up the McDonald's to see if I could find any information on it. However, I could not find anything. I still don't know who was in there or what the story was with that McDonald's. One night after work, I went to McDonald's. I was very hungry and every other place was closed. It was after 10 p.m., so the options for food were very slim, at least in the area that I live. I went to the McDonald's closer to my work, but on the way home. I pulled into the parking lot, walked in, and ordered at one of the screens. Then I waited for a little while. There were a couple of other people inside, but not many. I really didn't pay them much attention, though. As I waited for my order, I just went on my phone. Soon enough, my order was called, and I got it and then left. I walked to my car, got in, and started to drive home. When I pulled out onto the road, this truck pulled out from the McDonald's right behind me. Then it started to follow me, and by this point where we were basically the only 2 cars on the road. I wouldn't have been that suspicious at first, but then the truck turned where I did and it started honking. I hadn't done anything wrong, and I was wondering why the truck was honking at me. I slowed down and moved to the right side of the road. I thought that maybe the truck wanted to pass me, but when I did, he made no attempt to get by. Then he started flashing his brights on and off. Clearly this guy was really trying to get my attention or had a big problem with me. I pulled over to the side of the road completely and stopped. When I did, the truck went forward going past me, but then went right in front of me and stopped. He stopped in a way where he was basically cutting me off and blocking my path. It was really aggressive. Then the driver's door opened and this man walked out. I recognized him and realized that he was one of the people that was inside the McDonald's. I'm not sure how I noticed so fast, because I hadn't really paid much attention to the people in there. But nevertheless I did, and he was now walking towards my car. It seemed like the guy was up to no good, and I felt like I needed to get out of there. So as soon as the man quickly approached my driver's door, I put the car into reverse. Then I backed up down the side of the road, and the guy quickly went back over to his truck. I made a U-turn and now started going the opposite way down the road. When I did, the man was able to get back to his truck fast enough and started to follow me again. As I was driving the other way on the road now, he quickly caught back up to me. I wasn't sure where to go, and there was not a whole lot around in the general area. Plus, it was late at night, which did not help the matter. As I drove down that road, I just decided to go back to the McDonald's. It was a public place with other people, so it felt a little bit safer. When I saw it again, I pulled into the parking lot. Then I quickly parked. The man in the truck also drove to the McDonald's and parked. I got out of my car quickly and walked back inside as the truck was parking. When I got into the McDonald's, I realized that the man did not get out of his truck. He was still inside it, waiting for me to leave probably. But I was not going to. I went and sat down in the McDonald's and then just waited. I looked out the window watching the guy's truck. I sat there for probably 20 or 30 minutes. Then, finally, I saw the truck drive away. After it left, I left, and I was able to drive home finally. I made it back safe, but I never found out why that guy was following me. Clearly, he really wanted something with me, but I have no idea what.